Hello, and welcome to our webinar today. We are NAZ Solar Electric. I am Therese, the Wholesale Account Manager here at NAZ, and we are so happy to be with LG ESS today to hear about the Home 8 AC coupling solution that they are providing and that we currently have in stock and ready to ship. So we're just thrilled to have this opportunity to share more information with you, and we'll be able to answer any questions at the end of the session. So I would like to introduce Sandra, the engineer from LG ESS, who is here to tell us about the system today. Sandra, take it away.
Thank you, Therese. And can you confirm that my mic is coming in?
Yes, you sound great.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, thank you, everybody. Welcome. And I know how busy we all are, and I know how difficult it is to take the time to do these webinars. So that you know, we are recording. It will be posted, so that if you want to review or if you have somebody who missed the presentation, we can always go back to it. I also posted my email address here if you guys want to get in touch with me directly and have any technical questions. As Therese mentioned, I am a sales application engineer, part of the LG ESS business. I've been in the storage industry for many, many years. I actually stopped saying beyond 10 years. But I'm super excited to be working with LG now and to present this new product. A little bit about the agenda here, and we can jump in quickly into the presentation. I don't usually take a huge amount of time to talk about LG because we are so well known. But I do want to share this part with you guys that although Home 8, which is the LG ESS solution, is fairly new in the U.S. We launched it last year around September. It isn't a new product. We've launched this product in Europe in 2016. Obviously, the inverter is a little bit different because of, Europe being 230, 50 hertz, but it's not any different technology. Another thing that we know from research done in the storage, residential storage, is that the consumers are starting to ask for a brand name. The consumers are starting to hear advertisement from different companies. And we've learned from installers that when the consumer hears, oh, LG, yes, I know LG. And another thing is we have integrated Home 8 with any other LG appliance in the home. So if the homeowner already has something else, LG, say an air conditioning or washer and dryer, they are most likely already using the ThinQ app, which I hope to have a little bit of time today to touch on the app. If they have the app already, or if they don't, they can always download it, then Home 8 becomes yet another appliance within their home. And just like an air conditioning that I can turn it on from my office or lower the temperature so that I know when I come home I have the perfect temperature, I can do the same control and monitoring of the Home 8. We do have a dedicated team for the Home 8 for the LG ESS. Our headquarters is in Georgia, and here we have our marketing, we have our director of engineering, business, and also we have a lab and a training facility. However, the rest of the team, sales application engineers, as well as account managers, are in different regions of the country. So we're more of a remote type. So now let's dive directly into the product, which is what we're here for. So the Home 8 has one of the benefits that everything is included in a single box. And I'll show you a better picture here moving in the slides, but you will find that the batteries the BMS or battery management system, the inverter, which by the way is a 7.5 kW inverter charger, which is a little bit larger than most of my competition. So all of that is in a single enclosure. So it looks very attractive, very slim, about 8 inches in depth. And it makes it really simple to install. Now, I was just having this conversation with some of my colleagues. Yeah, it does weigh 359 pounds all put together. And unless you have the right cart or weight management equipment, yeah, 359 pounds is a lot for a single person to lift, right? But there's other options, and I will share those with you as I'm moving through the presentation. So key point here is everything is in the single enclosure, the batteries, the BMS, and the inverter. And what you're seeing here on the very top, that smaller box with the LCD is our MID or microgrid interconnect device, which we call the SE box. I will give you more info on that in the next slide. With the Homemade, you can start with one unit, and you have 14.4 kWh usable, right? So when the customer sees 100% state of charge, he has 14.4, and he can take that battery to zero. Of course, that's not recommended, but I'm making this point because some of our competition, you cannot go to zero. It leaves the factory set to a minimum of 10%, but it can be overridden. It could be adjusted using the ThinQ app, and the customer could literally use it all the way to zero state of charge. There's no danger because behind the scenes, we've built in buffer capacity on both ends because we know in the ESS world that is not a good idea to go to zero. But you're not really. The consumer sees zero because he has used up his 14.4. But we've built that buffers on both sides for safety, which brings me to our safety certifications. So we have both UL 9540 as well as 9540A. And that means that we've been put through by a third party in UL testing to ensure that there's no risk of the thermal runaway. Now, of course, UL does induce a overtemp on one of the cells. And the idea is that it doesn't continue or dissipate to the unit or beyond the enclosure. So we received passing grade on the certification. The batteries are NMCs, and they have a 10-year warranty. Now, there's a little here on the title that says, if you are connected to ThinQ, you receive the 10-year warranty. However, that's not true in California. 100% of our customers in California receive the 10-year warranty. Everybody else in the U.S., it's encouraged to log in to ThinQ, the app. It's free. It allows you to monitor, to control, and that adds the extra 5 years, which will make your battery into a 10-year warranty. You know, something else we say about the battery, and it's funny because when you look at most of the competitors, they'll talk to you about cycles. And if you look at my manuals, my warranty statement, you will see nowhere the word cycles. What we're saying is that the battery has a 10-year warranty, and at 10 years, you will still have remaining 70% capacity, 70% capacity. And that is possible because of the chemistry of the batteries, right? We know all of the batteries of any chemistry. You can even talk about the old style lead acid batteries. They all lose capacity as they age. And of course, it's not linear. It's not 1% per year. It varies, right? We have a much, much better performance with lithium and even better performance with NMC batteries. Now we look at our SE box or Smart Energy box. And here's where we make all the electrical connections. There's a couple of things that I want to point out of this photo. I actually took this photo from an installation to show you. There is this 7-inch tablet that I'm highlighting. Hopefully you're seeing my mouse moving over. I'm trying to use this as a pointer. And one of the feedbacks that we received when we were launching the product is how long it takes to commission a system. And then you have the anecdotal experiences from installers. I got to the site, I don't have a laptop, somebody requires a special dongle that I didn't have, I couldn't finish the commissioning, I didn't want to have to download an app, or I didn't want to create credentials, or the more typical one, I had no internet. How many times have we gone to the site, the homeowner's not home, you know they have internet, but you don't have access to their Wi-Fi. You have no internet. And now we're scrambling, trying to create a hotspot with our phone and see if we can finish the commissioning. So we took all of that out. You can complete 100% commissioning of this product without internet, without a phone, without a tablet, without a laptop, or no special dongle needed. All of this directly on this LCD. As soon as you plug in the communication cables and the electrical, it comes on, and the commissioning wizard will start. And we will walk you through selecting the language, which language you want to set it up, go through all the modes of operation. And even if you needed to do a firmware update. Now, here's another thing that I've heard, and perhaps some of you in the audience who are installing ESS might confirm. In some cases, you get ESSs installed that are not functional unless you do a firmware update. They just simply are not going to create a sine wave, voltage, and frequency until you do a firmware update. That is not true with our unit. The unit will show up with a functional tested firmware that will allow you to complete the commissioning without needing to do a firmware update. However, if you knew, hey, there's this new firmware update because there's a new California code that you needed to upload and you didn't have internet, you could bring a thumb drive and you could do the firmware update right on the unit again, not needing Wi-Fi. Now, let's back up a little bit and let's say you have the internet, you have your phone, you have ThinQ, of course you can do all of that on the app, right? This is just a third way where you can do the firmware if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have internet or you don't have your phone with you. So other things that I want to point out in the box, especially this image, you see here I'm showing a 200 amp breaker. This breaker is actually not included because you may not want to make this box the main service entrance if you wanted to. And I also know there's some areas in the U.S. where this is not allowed. So you may want to make it a main. In this case, you would install a breaker. And, of course, we don't know what size breaker you're going to want, and it will accept anywhere from 100 to 200 amps in here. And, again, if you don't need it, what you will find are these lugs for the grid input, L1, L2, and then you also have ground and neutral here. On the other side, also not included, and these are going to be 40 amp dual pole breakers. There's 5 spaces, 4 because you can stack as many as 4 of the Home 8s into one of the SC box. So you can make 4 inverter with batteries with a single Home 8. In the last breaker space is for the PV. In the next slide, I'm going to show you, which will make a little more sense, a visual of where we make the connection. I talked a little bit about the weight of homemade, so let me point out that this box weighs 55 pounds. Inside the SC box, you will see actually one set of CTs you don't see. These CTs are built in, and they do the net measurement, right? So these you will have no access to. These are internal and included. There's one more CT that comes with, oh, I'm sorry, let me come back because I'm not showing it on this slide. But there's one CT that comes with, which is going to be the CT for the PV inverter. Okay, so I'm not showing that here. Built-in CT for the net, which will take everything coming from the grid, everything going to the loads, everything from the homemade and the batteries, and if there's a backup panel or if it's a main whole home backup. This homemade can actually support both applications. You want to do a whole home backup or you want to do a partial. Obviously, if you're going to do a whole home backup, you most likely are going to need more than one, but just to clarify that you can do both. Now, what happens if you have, these are very strange configurations that I'm showing here on the screen, but they're possible. And in this case, if the loads are not connected to the SC box, then the CTs built in are not going to correctly or accurately display data. So there's additional CTs which are could be installed, not included, but you can buy through our distributor, a host of this training, and you can have CTs for these more specific installations. So to be clear, built-in CTs and the PV CT comes with. If you wanted to add more CTs because you have a very special scenario and you're not capturing all of the consumption, you can add additional CTs to the SE box. Okay. So the homemade is a AC couple system, which means that you can have a new construction where you bring an array with string inverter or microinverters if you have multiple inverters, or you can do a retrofit. But you can also do backup only and no PV. Maybe you have a customer that says, I just got tired of that generator, the noise, having to deal with the fuel, the maintenance, and I don't really have a lot of very long power outages. Maybe that customer just wants the homemade with the batteries and doesn't want the array. Or maybe he wants to do the array later. That's absolutely possible. There's no problem to deploy the system with or without solar. So let me touch a little bit about the solar, okay? Because I always get a lot of questions, and it's funny because I'm actually trying to upgrade this photo because this photo is a little confusing. You can have one homemade with as much as 8 kW AC output PV. Okay, I'm not saying array size, right? I'm saying on the AC side of the PV inverter, because maybe you have a 10 kW array, but due to shading or perhaps the age of the array or just not the perfect angle, it wasn't perfectly facing south, that array never gave 10 kW output AC. So this is why we're making the differentiation here, that we recommend that the PV AC output per homemade is 8 kW. And of course, if you look at my very simplified table here, it's 16 for 2 and 24 and so on. What is funny about this image, what I want to upgrade, that I always get this question, so you can have 4 PV inverters with 4 homemade, and that's not true. Because you can have 28 microinverters. You can have 30 microinverters, right? So the number of the microinverters or the number of the string inverters doesn't matter. The array size doesn't matter. What matters is the AC output. Okay? Now, what are the compatible PV inverters, right? So I could probably spend my allocated 30 minutes going on about the brands of inverters. But to simplify it, I will say that if it's a newer or what we're calling smart inverter, it's an inverter that supports frequency watt. Another way to look at this, is a California Rule 21 certified, then it's no problem. Okay? So that, and by the way, and I know not everybody on the call is from California, if in your area it's allowed, you're not in California, but you're allowed to set your inverter to California Rule 21, in my opinion, everybody's going to go in this direction anyways. But if you can proactively now set up your PV inverter to California Rule 21, the homemade actually behaves and interacts even better with that inverter. Now, if it's an inverter with IEEE 1547 2018, no problem, right? No problem, right? It's just going to behave a little bit different. All right, so PV inverter compatible, which are supporting frequency watt. The array size is not important. The number of PV inverters is not important. The AC output. Now, what happens if your AC output is greater than what we recommend? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. Just remember, when you look at this, so let's follow, and hopefully you can see my mouse moving. Let's follow the current here. In this specific scenario, my grid is present, it's available. Okay, so what the PV inverters are doing right now is just simply they synchronize to the grid, and they are injecting current. How much current does a PV inverter provide depends on the sun, right? So their job is just pushing current, synchronized with the sine wave, push current, right? So if you follow my mouse here through the current path, you will see that during normal operations, the grid is present. This current is not touching the homemade at all. Within the homemade logic, though, because we are connected to this smart box, we can actually select some of that current and charge batteries. But unlike the older style, I'm going to call it legacy because I don't like to say older, the legacy AC coupling where you actually went in through the inverter, pass through the inverter and out, then you had limits to the maximum pass-through of that inverter. But in this case, it's not. The only time where the size of the array becomes of concern to the installer and the designer and the system owner is when we have a power outage. In that case, the homemade, within about 100 milliseconds, that grid goes out. The SE box has an automatic transfer switch, so now we're isolated from the grid. The homemade starts creating the sine wave, voltage and frequency. The PV inverters look at this and go, oh, my grid is back. Not a clue. They don't have a clue that this isn't the grid because the homemade output is grid-like quality. Right? So now the PV inverters are going to synchronize to the sine wave that the single homemade or the dual or the four stack are creating because they're talking to each other, so they're going to be in sync or synchronized with each other. Then the PV inverter will start injecting current into the system. And as you see in my diagram, then we have the customer loads are first stop. The customer loads will be taken care of first from the current, from the PV. If there's any excess from the PV, then we're going to charge the batteries. if the power outage is extended and we have more PV than we need for the house, you can imagine that we're going to get to a point where the batteries are at 100%. The house loads are taken care of, but the PV inverter's job is to keep pushing the current, right? So what we do is that we deploy an architecture called frequency shifting, because we know that all of these smart inverters must, by regulation of UL 1741 and IEEE 1547, they have to react to changes to the frequency. As the frequency is moving up, they start throttling back. So when we move the frequency from 60 hertz up, then the PV inverters will scale back down. And we can actually shut them off completely. The frequency will get to 62.5, and all of the PV inverters, they must turn off. So if we get to a scenario where, hey, there's very little on the house loads, the batteries are fully charged, but the PV is just too much, we can turn off the PV and we can support the loads with the batteries. So this is the great thing about this architecture, is that we do not need to be concerned with what brand PV inverter. I'm not communicating with them. I don't need to speak the same language. I don't have to have a communication protocol. I don't need to do anything else, because I am actually taking advantage of the smart inverter architecture and shifting the frequency and then making those inverters throttle back or go full power if I need it. So some of the things that you can do with the unit in the commissioning through programming is that you can decide, what do we do with the battery, right? So here we have an example of a PV self-consumption, right? So the idea here is we're trying to minimize the electric bill. So we're trying to make sure that the customer has a lower electric bill than before he had the ESS installed. So if we look at my drawing here on the left side and you see the blue arrows, when we have this program and we have excess PV, the PV will go to support the loads. If we need to, we will charge the batteries. And if there's still excess power from the array, it will go out to the grid, obviously provided that this customer has an agreement to export power out. In the next scenario, where maybe it's the end of the day, the sun is going down, so now I don't have as much PV. Now I'm supplementing the loads with a mixture of whatever I'm getting from the PV. And remember, the Home 8 knows how much is coming down from the array because of the CT that is built in or part of the SC box. So I can tell as the PV array is delivering less and less, and the Home 8 then can ramp up and support the loads. Now here is the customer needs to tell us how much do you want to utilize the batteries, because in this scenario, the grid is there. And depending on where you are, there are places where you want to say, okay, I don't want to really use all of my battery. Maybe I just go down to 50% because I'm concerned with power outages and I want to leave some in reserve. So all of that can be set through ThinQ, and I can actually say, okay, I don't discharge my batteries any more than, right? Or you can have another scenario where the customer says, no, I don't care. I don't have power outages here. My number one concern is how much I'm paying every month to the utility company. So you literally could discharge the batteries to the loads even though you haven't had a power outage. And that's entirely up to the consumer. And even after the installer does the original commissioning in settings, the consumer can actually, through the same queue, go back in and adjust, right? Or as an installer, you can do this remotely. In addition to the ThinQ app, we have an installer web-based. So it's not an app on the phone, but it's a web-based. You can open it on a browser on the phone if you want to, but it's much more comfortable on a desktop or laptop. You could be at your office and you have the customer saying, hey, I really want to, my bill is still a little too high. I'm not worried about power outages. I really want to utilize those batteries a little bit more at the end of the day. And you don't have to go. You don't have to go to the customer to make the adjustments. You could do this from your office and make the adjustment. Another mode of operation is backup only, and I mentioned this a little bit. Backup only can be with or without solar. The main point of backup only is that when the grid is present, we're not touching the batteries at all. The batteries are staying 100% full at all times, and the batteries will get charged with any available source. Okay, so if the batteries are below 100 and the grid is there and there's no solar, it's going to try to charge with the grid. If it needs to charge and the solar is there, it's going to grab from the solar, or it's going to grab from any mix, because in this mode where we're telling the homemade is you need to be ready for an emergency, and your job is to keep these batteries at 100%. And it does nothing with the stored power until we have a power outage. And at that point, go back to what I said before, the SC box internal transfer switch will open, and then we will start supporting the loads with the batteries. And if there's solar, then we'll also do combination of solar. So in this case, during power outage is when the homemade kicks in and starts working and starts supporting the customer. I mentioned a little bit about our switching time. And if you look at our specs, you will see that we say less than 100 milliseconds from the time that the grid goes out to the time the homemade. So for most things in a home, it's almost seamless. What I do have here on the screen is a scope capture that we had on a real site, and we logged much faster. But at the same time, we're very conservative with our data. I know a lot of our competitors sometimes they round up a lot, and then you go, well, wait a minute, this is not even close. But we try not to do that. But I wanted to share that at one time we saw this much faster, but at our spec sheet we claim that the transfer is less than 100 milliseconds. Now, I'm sure that there are some things in a home that would reset. Maybe something could reset. But most things, the customer probably won't even notice the lights flickering. Another mode of operation, and of course this is very popular in California, and in other parts of the country, not so much. There's no interest for this. But I will say that what's happening in California in my years of experience, pretty much it's announcing what's coming maybe a few months later to the other states. So quickly, because it might not be applicable for everybody, but I'm showing you two different interfaces here. I'm showing you from the app, and I'm showing you from the installer interface. You can set up as many as 48 different times within the week, weekend, summertime, wintertime, and they can be adjusted. So recently we had in California where the utility company had the peak up to 5 p.m., but then they moved it. And so the consumer can literally, with these slider bars, can move the time automatically to earlier, which I believe it was 4 p.m. So it's not very difficult. And if the consumer didn't feel comfortable doing that, they can call the installer, and the installer could do this from their office. It can be done remotely, so it's not something that you need to go to the site to go take care of. This one, as far as I know, it's been only for California, and this has been related to some of the wildfires and high wind events where the utility company basically gives the homeowner a heads up via text saying, hey, we're going to cut the power. And then they take, I've heard, I don't live in California. As a matter of fact, I'm further north up in Washington, so I haven't experienced this. But talking to installers, I've heard that then the utility company will wait until they have checked everything, all of the lines, before they bring the power back. So these PSPS events can go on for a while sometimes. And the idea is, hey, heads up, we're going to cut the power. And so you, as the owner of the system or installer, if you like, can go in and set the time, the date and the time. And so it doesn't matter what mode of operation the homemade is in, it will overwrite. So let's say you had it set up for PV self-consumption or anything else, it will override immediately everything else, and it will charge the batteries. It will make sure the batteries are 100%, and we wait for the event. So we had a power outage, the batteries are used, then the cycle repeats itself. If the time expires and the event didn't happen, then the homemade automatically goes back to the original settings and will start exporting power out again. So it's not something that we need to worry, oh my God, what settings, I forgot the settings, and now I'm stuck on this PSPS. It will automatically do this. Very similar, a little bit more automatic though, because the problem we have with PSPS is because it's very manual, because at this point the utility company, it's notifying people not very actively, just either because it's by region, so mostly by text. But with emergency ready, which some of my competitors call this weather, it is a weather-based setting. And so you look at this toggle switching I show in the image to the right, you have all of these weather events. Obviously, if you're in California, you're not going to have tropicals and hurricanes or things like that, but you might have flooding. And so you select what's applicable to you. This only works, by the way, if you have your system connected to ThinQ. And so ThinQ is automatically synced to AccuWeather. So if any of these events that you selected are coming, then immediately homemade goes to protect the battery 100% state of charge, because we're going to have weather and most likely a power outage. So in the next few minutes, I want to go really quickly over the installation. I mentioned how slim this unit is. Remember, everything is in here. The batteries, the BMS, the inverter, everything is inside the enclosure. Couple of ways to do the installation. Now, we recommend that everything comes included in the box. Everything comes pre-wire. If you could lift the weight, the 359 pounds, you would only need to connect AC input, L1, L2, neutral, ground. If you could lift it and mount it. Now, I want to say that this unit is intended to be floor standing. It does have a bracket for the wall, but that bracket is only for stability and support. So it needs to be floor standing. If you cannot manage the weight, you see in my image here these battery packs. Each one of these battery packs weighs 57 pounds. You can easily pull them out. There's two cables that come already plugged in. You have the electrical cables and you have the communication cables. But we've made it really simple. You don't need to worry, what do I do with this red one? What do I do with this black one? Where does it go? It's a harness. It's a wire harness. There's no way to make a mistake. You just plug it in daisy chain. Plug it in, and you've done the electrical connection. It has a built-in 40-amp breaker and one that you can't see, but it's a fuse in the back, and that's the protection that we need. The cable that goes here is the communication, also impossible to cross-wire. You just push it in, don't force it. If it goes in, then it's going in the right direction. So that makes the unit about a little over 100 pounds. So now you can lift the enclosure in the inverter, do the installation, adjust the feedies, and then push the batteries back in and finish the installation. We do have a YouTube channel, which I think my next slide will show the YouTube channel. And in here, if you go to YouTube and you search for this, you will find us. We don't have a lot of videos. We are building the library, but we do have the video for the installation, and we show you step by step. Both installations are perfectly acceptable. What I mean by both installations, one is if you want to install all of it together, comes out of the crate with the batteries all put together, everything is wired, and you put it on the wall. And then the second acceptable installation, which is pulling the 4 battery packs, mounting the enclosure, mounting the inverter, and then bringing the batteries. This will not impact your warranty. This is absolutely an acceptable installation procedure. Okay. Last couple of minutes, want to touch on specifications here really quickly. Highlight the temperature ranges. In my opinion, we are just about as everybody else, ESS with temperature, certifications for altitude, the same thing with noise. Noise, I bring it up because there are 2 fans for cooling. So cooling, the air intake is up here. So this is not a shelf for you to put the manual on top. Very funny because we've seen that happen. So we want to make sure that the air intake is clear. The last thing I want to touch on, because there's a lot of talk in the industry about lithium batteries, and there's a lot of personal opinion, I would say, misleading information about safety of lithium batteries. And that we've taken a lot of effort in our batteries. Our batteries are NMCs, they're cylindrical. And what I'm highlighting here, which is quite unique for us, most attach the batteries directly to the bus bar. But we've actually took the extra step of attaching the battery through this aluminum conductor. And that gives us extra safety, because if this cell that I'm highlighting here is having a problem, this aluminum conductor will act as a fuse. It will melt and prevent any thermal runaway where all of the units, all of the other cells could be compromised, right? So in addition to having our certification, we've taken extra steps in the design of the battery pack. And oh, by the way, last thing I'll say is everything in the box is an LG product. The batteries are LG, the software is LG, the inverter is LG. And why do I make a big deal about this? It's because sometimes we've seen in the last few years supply chain issues. And then we've seen a lot of the competitors not able to get batteries. They have the product, but they don't have batteries. Well, these are our batteries. And I will skip through the rest of my slides because I'm running out of time. However, we are going to make these available. So if you want to look at the whole slide deck later, and also you have my email, which will also be posted at the end of the presentation. And you can always reach me directly. And if you want to have additional discussion about the product, I am happy to do so. Really, thank you so much for your time. And let me leave you in the very capable hands of Doug, who's going to take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Again, my name's Doug. I'm one of the solar applications designers here at NAZ Solar Electric, and Sandra did a really great presentation of the capabilities of the LG ESS system. We're pretty excited to carry it. I think it's a great solution for anybody that wants battery backup, any customer that has a current grid tie system and wants to add battery backup. UPS, it makes a great standalone UPS system, so it's a great solution for a lot of people, especially the California grid tie customers that are going to be coming under the new net metering scheme, NEM 3.0. This is a fantastic way to kind of leverage your grid tie system with an ESS battery backup system. Sandra pretty much is pretty thorough about all the basics. I'll just kind of touch some of the highlights again to reiterate. This is what I would say is, LG's solution to the Tesla Powerwall. I've had a lot of customers asking for Tesla Powerwalls. Of course, you have to go directly to Tesla for that. LG's got a great, and in my opinion, a better solution than the Tesla Powerwall. Good thing is it's system agnostic. Again, any modern grid tie solar system, you can integrate the LG Home 8 into that for battery backup. We're partnering with LG, as she mentioned. It's a one-stop shop, so to speak. LG, well-known brand, has great support, so that's an added benefit. Other than that, she pretty much hit all the highlights there. Again, we're pretty excited to offer this to our installers as a great battery backup solution. So I don't know if we have any questions among the attendees there, but if you got any questions, you can type them in the chat area there, and we can answer any questions you might have. Am I right? Can they only type in the questions, or are they have enabled audio too?
No, they can only type them in. The other thing I will say, Doug, thank you so much, and everybody for this. If you have questions, put them in, although we're going to log off here shortly. All the questions will be downloaded to us, and I will make sure to respond to your questions. So if you have a question that didn't get, that got overlooked, because sometimes I miss these chat questions, we will follow up with you directly. You put in your email address when you logged in, so we know how to reach you. Put in your question. And thank you, everybody. If anybody else wants to say goodbye, I will say goodbye for LG.
Yeah, I just wanted to say too. So this will be recorded, right, and available. This presentation available in recorded form. We're also looking into giving some more video presentations on our NAZ Solar Electric YouTube channel, so look for those in the future as well on the LG ESS systems. All right, no questions? Anybody? I think I've got the Q&A opened here. Yeah, don't see any questions. So. All right, anybody have anything else? Therese, do you have anything else you need to touch base on?
Nope, just let me know if you want a quote. Like I said, in stock and ready to ship. Thanks for attending today.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.